come to the Spirit, the three in one. I come to the water, just as I am, oh God, make me new once again. I've traveled.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Fridays with Francis. Sometime back, we had a storm here on the lake where we are living, and it really did a lot of damage to our pier and our boathouse. A big storm came along, and it just really wiped out the floor. And much of the floor down at the boathouse was covered by water. We had some tables and chairs out there that some of them had fallen into the water. Some of them were still out on the flooring, but there was also a rug that the wind had blown up and crumpled it all up. And so I went down to the boathouse and tried to straighten things out. As I began straightening things out, I moved some chairs. I retrieved the chairs from those that were in the water, and then I was walking all around that old crumpled up rug, and I decided I needed to straighten that rug out. So I grabbed one of the corners of the rug and I straightened it out, and just as I did, this huge water moccasin comes crawling out from underneath that rug. I had walked all over that water moccasin and never had gotten any kind of reaction from him. And no threat. He didn't bite me. He got my attention. He crawled on away from me into the water and was gone. But I thought about that and how dangerous that was, and I can only attribute it to the grace of God. Where I grew up, there was an old saying once that said, God always looks out for children, drunks, and fools. And I'm no child, and I don't drink, so I reckon I know what I am. God certainly did look after me that day. It reminded me of a story out of the Scripture. The Apostle Paul, of course, was traveling to Rome, and he was a prisoner, and he was sailing to Rome and became shipwrecked. Managed to get to shore, and it turns out that it was the island of Malta. And there on that island, the natives were very friendly, and it was apparently rainy and cold. And they built a fire for those who survived the shipwreck. Of course, Paul was one of them. And built a fire so they could warm themselves. And Paul went and gathered a bundle of sticks and came and laid them down on the fire. And as he did, a viper came up out of the woods, out of the sticks, and latched hold of his hand. And when he lifted his hand up, the natives saw him standing there with the viper hanging from his hand. And they made an assumption that Paul must be a murderer or a criminal of some sort, because if that were not the case, God would not have let the serpent bite him. Well, they expected to see Paul, he shook the serpent off, and they expected to see Paul swell up or become ill, but it didn't affect him at all. The poisonous snake that had bit him didn't have any effect on him whatsoever, and the Scripture says that they changed their minds and decided to believe in what Paul had to say. It made me wonder, have you ever found yourself in one of those places where you're faced with a very difficult circumstance, and yet it was only only the grace of God that brought you through it? Most of us can look back across our years and we can remember a time. We can recall those moments when life itself seems to be closing in on us. We have sickness in the family, or we suddenly lose our job, or we have a difficult decision to make. And at the time we wonder how in the world we're going to get through it. And then years later we look back and we can see that those circumstances that we went through have the fingerprint of God all over it. King David, when he was a shepherd boy, penned some words that speak to this so well. He describes a circumstance where even though he's walking through a valley of the shadow of death, he fears no evil, because God is helping him walk through the valley to the other side. Yes, you know it as Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Well, these are words of encouragement, especially in those moments when we make a turn in life and all of a sudden we find ourselves confronted with a serpent or a circumstance that makes it difficult for us to see the outcome. But the promise of God is a promise that's sure. I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Thanks be to God. Well, that's about it for this edition of Fridays with Francis. I hope you have a wonderful weekend on this Memorial Day weekend, and that you have an opportunity to reflect, recall, remember all the ways that God has brought you through the times in the past and the promise that he will be with you in the times of the future. So, go in peace.
I
Go with God.
come to the Father, I come to the Son, I come to the Spirit, the three in one. I come to the water, just as I am, O God, make me new once again. I've traveled so far from family and home, from the God who knows me as one of God's own. By baptism waters, I've stood before the Lord. Oh God, won't you cleanse me